Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sanctified Mind podcast. I'm Ryan Hedrick, and I'm here with my friends Daniel and Bo. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are y'all? Good to be back.
I am also doing well.
Well, great. We're here to discuss a book that I chose this month by author James Jordan.
And the first podcast of 2021.
It is 2021.
The start of the new season, season 3. It's been a lot of episodes.
The Coming Storm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Maybe we can get into that discussion. Why you picked The Coming Storm?
Well, we should.
Okay. Well,
let's
we'll see
talk about
that
the book
because this is my choice for this month, so we'll follow my schedule here.
Sorry. Excuse me.
To give a little bit of background about the author, he was born right here in Georgia. He is a Reformed author who's still living and writing ideas that are continuing to challenge me. I think that's a good word, challenge. And I chose this book because I've been trying to get you guys to read him for about a year now, and you have refused to do it, so the podcast is the only way I can get you to do it. But really, the book is called Christendom and the Nations. I read it some time ago. It's free on Kindle Unlimited, so that was something that I found attractive about it. It's very concise. It's very short, about 150, 175 pages. Interesting, which is, for me, remarkable because it's about a lot of things involving politics, and I could be about as unpolitically inclined as anybody that you can find. So,
well, you got a political science degree.
Right.
That's what I was going to say. Look, I will mention that shortly. But, it's very biblically grounded, I think, and it prevents a sound analysis of what a Christian nation and its policies should look like. And we're going to get into some of those topics shortly. What did you guys think about the book and your thoughts?
So I got to say, one of the first things that I really kind of liked was the reintroduction to my vocabulary of the word Christendom. That's not a word that we typically hear much about these days. I thought it was interesting when you mentioned this book that it talks about Christendom, because I, in my mind at least, kind of associate the idea of Christendom with my postmillennialism. And
Is it Christendom or is it
Christendom?
Christendom.
There's a T there.
Yes.
All right, sorry.
There's a T.
Continue.
So, okay, well, that's a subject that you can put on our Facebook page. Is it Christendom or Christendom? To me, there's a T there. Nonetheless, Christendom is a very interesting concept to me in general, and one that, as the Baptist that I am, didn't grow up hearing a lot of. But in all the old movies I watch, it's always there. So I appreciate that. I really like this book. I read it very quickly once we decided on it and was able to go back through it and read it again. I think it's a great book. It speaks to a lot of different areas of life, from what is a nation, what does that look like, what ought to be the church's response to all of these things. It goes into things like foreign policy and the principles of war, just a lot of things that really kind of tickled my fancy. So I really appreciate it. I understand the author is known for his interpretive maximalism, and I'm sure we've got a lot more to say about that, Daniel. But I didn't really get too much of it out of this book. I felt like he didn't really stray too far on many subjects, and it's a pretty good, easy read that I think will be eye-opening for a lot of people.
Yeah, so I also liked the book.
Wow.
Ryan might be surprised.
I
will say, and I'm going to give a caveat with that, because it is James Jordan. He is the forebearer of the Federal Vision movement, one of the forebearers. So I think he should be
the black and tan or the amber lager?
He should be read with caution. But I definitely don't think that me disagreeing with someone on one area or someone writing something in the past that I would have disagreed with, disqualifies all their writing. Obviously, I think that, there can still be a lot gleaned good. And this book is proof of that, I think, because this book was good. I enjoyed this book, and I agreed with most of this book. But I would still say anything by someone who has that kind of controversy in their past, you just need to go into it, reading it with discernment, right? Which you need to read anyone with discernment. If you know there's some kind of error that the person has held in the past, then what you believe to be error, then you should be extra cautious. So I will give that caveat, but otherwise, I like the book. It's helpful. I think a lot of these things can apply on a more local level. I know he's specifically talking about the nations, and most of us are never going to have, a place where we're going to be influencing the nations, right? except for when we're in the voting booth, right, for most of us. But I think the book had a lot of good sound principles that Christians should be pursuing and supporting. So we can get more into that, but I really liked how also he seems to not be falling into the error of the two kingdom thing where, you know, this book kind of shows like, well, we leave our Christianity at church and then we go do the rest of our life. No, he even says in the book, in the first chapter, he says, after all, we are supposed to disciple the family, then why not the state? Biblical Christianity claims that all areas of life are claimed by King Jesus and all must answer to him. That doesn't mean that, you know, Christ is all things to all people, right? There's a difference between what Christ is and who the kind of ruler Christ is to his church and to the state. But still, everyone is to, you know, all spheres of life are to bow down to the king and to follow him. So I did appreciate that he's trying to take the Christian faith and say, hey, Christians, this is how you can apply biblical principles to foreign policy, national politics, etc. So I think that was great.
Yeah, I actually was trying to look up a summary just the other day of what the differences were between his view and two kingdoms and other things. And one of the main concepts that popped out was Jordan's belief that culture comes from its religion. You know, it's downstream. So how, you know, a society believes in God or not is going to affect all the sorts of things that you're going to see play out in that society. And that's something that, you know, I would say that's probably an impetus for this book when he's talking about, you know, how should a nation make allies or go to war, have boundaries, free trade, immigration, all these different concepts that he's talking about here comes from his belief that because we're supposed to make disciples of nations, not just individual people, that, and that is the part of the Great Commission that he highlights, that's going to definitely impact, you know, his post-millennialism is something we've talked about, his belief that, you know, Christianity can have an impact in culture. And these are all of, you know, reasons why I found this to be something very eye-opening to me. You guys mentioned I have a political science degree from, you know, my undergrad. I learned more probably from this book than the 4 years I was taking like any classes or professors.
Take that, Georgia Tech.
Well, I mean,
I'm sure your parents
true.
will be happy to hear that.
Hey, I paid the bill, so it's fine.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, I'm sure I plan to get into that more in the discussion part, but this book definitely challenged me. I am a conservative, typical, you know, obvious right-wing leaning kind of person who is prone to, you know, getting a little too identified with that conservative right-wingism, right? And this book really made me call into question how much of my political beliefs coincide with what the Bible teaches. My identity as a Christian obviously supersedes my identity as a conservative. So I called into question a number of different things that I'd kind of taken the conservative notion on, and don't read that as saying I'm interpreting it as, you know, liberalism. That's not what I'm saying. But really calling those things into question, seeing where there may be some tensions between the conservative ideas on certain subjects and the biblical ideas on certain subjects. And obviously, as a Christian, I want to be more biblical than I am conservative ideological.
Well, we've heard a lot about Christian nationalism recently. A lot of people speaking out against this idea, so with all the Trump stuff. So is he advocating Christian nationalism here?
I'd probably have to get a bit more clarity as to what.
Yeah, what do you mean by Christian nationalism?
Well, I mean, just the idea that, you know, super like identifying like religious biblical beliefs with conservatism, almost like across the board type thing.
I would definitely say that he grounds his ideas in the Bible. So,
right.
You know, he's not just going to match it to whatever the current fad is or,
yeah.
you know,
This is not a God. This is not a God baseball apple pie kind of thing. It is, what does the Bible actually teach on this subject, and how ought the nations that consider themselves Christian nations, how ought they to govern themselves according to those biblical principles? It's very theonomic in that sense.
Yeah, and I think just in general, like it's going to lean more towards current Republican conservative ideals than liberal ideals for the most part.
Sure.
But there's a lot of different things as far as like, you know, war, international alliances, immigration, free trade and stuff. That's going to be very different than, you know, Republican ideas of this is how we should do national politics. So it is very different. A lot of the principles might be there on the conservative side, but they've gotten far away from what he would. And again, he even says, like, national politics is complicated. Like, this is not meant to be some kind of like manifesto of how we should run things, but these are basic principles. And a lot of these principles, I think, coincide more with conservative Republican policies than they would liberal Democrats, but it's definitely not a Republican, textbook. This is how Republicans do things. Not at all. It's more so this is purely what we would do if we were trying to do our national politics based on what the Bible says, right?
Well, that's why it's challenging, because it's not just the same thing that you hear. Don't look at foreigners with suspicion.
Oh, that was huge. That was huge for me. That was a real ooh.
Yeah, we're going to get into that more probably in the post discussion, where he talks about these individual things. But, that's just something as a Republican through osmosis or whatever type of group I've been associating with. It's like, well, refugees, we got to watch out for the influx of Islam and different things. Well,
okay,
maybe,
Daniel's grinning like crazy, and I can't ignore it like it's not happening.
Okay.
So what are you grinning for over there?
Well, aren't you married to a refugee?
Oh, now we have to edit this. Good job. Thank you. Way to go.
I can't edit the video.
You're the one that edits it. Good job. No, I am not.
So one of the things that Jordan talks about in this book is the church being united. And we don't see that here at this table right now. But it does exist.
Oh, man.
In most principles, in most things.
So in full disclosure, we're all three married to non-Native American people. So
That's right. Ryan, where is your wife from?
Indonesia.
My wife is broadly from the Philippines.
Well, actually,
my wife's dad is from the Philippines.
So my wife might actually be constituted a refugee because she left when there were riots going on in her country. So,
yeah. And Bo?
my wife is a beautiful, exquisite, exotic Dominican Republican woman.
So that's right. There you go.
I love you, sweetheart.
Good description.
And so does Daniel, but not.
So we all love refugees. So I don't know why Bo made that comment about like refugees. I don't get it, but
right. Anyways, so moving on. Where were we at?
I don't know.
Okay, well, it's been a good book review, and we'll roll right
I didn't want to
into
say it. You
discussion.
made me say it, to be fair. It's a good book. We're going to discuss more as far as the actual, breaking down. I did have just some disagreements with him. Free trade was one that I had some reservations. How he describes nations is something I have some reservations and some more questions about. So we'll get into that in the further discussion. But overall, it's a good book. It's going to make you think. It's very small, maybe the smallest book we've done.
Yeah.
Very easy read.
Because
so
the last time I chose a book and they didn't allow it to be on the podcast because it was a little too big
because
for the
it was
brains,
a college
It was a textbook of like 400 pages.
It's not the first
They couldn't
textbook
handle it,
Ryan's
so.
chosen.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for joining us for season 3. We are looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do this.
See you guys.
See you soon.
Daniel. I didn't know what you were actually going to say.
Oh my God.